An American hero has ass cancer. Press F.
We are continuing to monitor breaking news out of the White House about former President Joe Biden. His office just revealed that the 46th president is diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. Let's check back in with Madeline Rivera. She is live at the White House for us.
Could you imagine the discourse if this had happened had he won the presidency? Like, all of the people are saying, nah, he's not too old to run, and then he gets giga ass cancer right after being inaugurated. Fantastic stuff, really.
Madeline.
Hey, John. So, yes, we just got this information within the last half hour or so. So I do just want to read the statement from the personal office of former President Joe Biden. It says, last week, President Joe Biden was seen for a new finding of a prostate nodule after experiencing increasing urinary symptoms. On Friday, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, characterized by a Gleason score of 9, grade group 5, with metastasis to the bone. While this represents a more aggressive form of the disease, the cancer appears to be more hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. The president and his family are reviewing treatment options with his physicians. So there have been a lot of headlines.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor or anything, but aggressive, metastasized to the bone. He's a million years old. Probably won't make it. MAGA responded with mockery. Oh, how terrible of MAGA. I certainly hope no one on the left responded with mockery. Fuck, dude. Joe Biden, man. Literally. It's probably not true, but the cynic in me, like, wonders. Because he literally spent his entire presidency having his aides cover up how bad his mental health was, right? Like, this is like widely known at this point. It makes me wonder if, like, was he doing this comeback tour? And then, you know, he wants to show up, go on The View, do this BBC interview, jerking him off or whatever. And then no one cares. Like, no one likes him. His popularity's in the tank. Nobody likes him. And then after that, he's like, okay, fine, we'll let him know. I don't really believe that. I think he probably just discovered it. But given what a precedent we've established for hiding health issues from the public, who knows?
Lines and concerns regarding the president's cognitive health. It was one of the reasons why he was pushed out of the presidential candidacy last year. But there have been very few headlines and concerns regarding the president's own physical health. In fact, I went back to see what the president's results were from his annual physical last year, and it said President Biden is a healthy, active, robust 81-year-old male who remains fit to successfully execute the duties of the presidency, to include those as chief executive, head of state, and commander-in-chief. So it is kind of shocking at this point. But the president, I've been thinking back to some of the activities that we've seen him do. This is a former president who was very active. We could see him go biking.
That's nice. Thank you. Isn't prostate cancer one of the ones you can catch early? It tends to, the symptoms tend to come on pretty quickly. I don't know, man. It's cancer. There's like a million ways cancer can happen. I don't know. It's complicated. He wasn't even that bad of a president up until he became the literal worst president in American history. Well, I can think of at least a few people who top him out on that. But no, it's difficult to feel even a mote of sympathy given how, like, recklessly and egotistically he tanked the country by not stepping down and only running for one term. I mean, okay, even if you leave aside the whole, like, he became the centrist Voltron to overwhelm Bernie Sanders in 2020, like, leaving aside that, and we shouldn't leave that aside, but let's leave it aside to be fair. He could have just been, like, a moderate president, good on labor issues, you know, relatively speaking. He could have been that. Weak on the development of fascism, to be sure, but, you know, whatever. It's just fascism. It's not a big deal. But then, of course, you've got two things. For one, Gaza, where he spent the second half of his presidency nonstop laundering a genocidal fascist regime, you know, trying to galvanize people on the left in his favor against, you know, pro-Palestinian protesters. Very disingenuous. And then, secondly, the insistence on running again, which was apparently, like, entirely ego-driven. Nobody else wanted it. Everyone else around him was like, dude, you're too old. But he didn't listen. It was him, Jill Biden, Hunter Biden, and a couple of his cohorts who were like, yeah, man, you're still spry. You're doing great. You know, why not? Run again. Who gives a f? And because Democrats forbid party infighting, nobody stepped against him up until the very last minute, where a coalition of every Democrat, except for the ones close to Joe Biden, forced him out. Like, you are the degree of capitulation to fascism, you know, inherent to insisting that you be the guy when you are not the guy. Like, the amount of not just being tone deaf, man, but you're like teeing them up. And then after the election, he comes back and he's like, well, I would have won anyway, had it been me and not Kamala Harris. Jesus, man. The new book, Biden talks about aides contemplating whether he would have to use a wheelchair if he won a second term. Yeah, it's wretched. The big one is him going to that George Clooney fundraiser and him evidently not recognizing George Clooney at the fundraiser that George Clooney, the famous actor George Clooney, was hosting for him, not recognizing him. And after that, George Clooney put out the article where he said that Joe Biden needs to step down. We talk about narcissism, but they all have it. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think that Joe Biden is a selfish, crabby, narcissistic old man. I think that the Democrats as a party are allergic to infighting of any kind unless it's punching left. Like, they refuse to have any kind of in-party debate that challenges moderates. They will not do it because they treat the party like a Make-A-Wish Foundation for geriatrics. Like, if you're old and you've been there for a while, you're just like unquestionably, your legacy is cemented, you know? There was a lot that contributed to it.
In Rehoboth Beach, whenever he would go down there with his family, he was very physically fit and very active, at least for his age. So this is
big caveat there. Big caveat. I did see a snippet of people beefing over this.
Washington correspondent Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, it's great to have you with us. Sadly, though, for this breaking news, unfortunately. Tell us a little bit about what you're thinking tonight. What have you been hearing from folks that you've been speaking to as this news of the president's diagnosis sets in?
Did you see that discussion on Twitter the other day about Jim Clyburn and white people not respecting their elders? I need everyone to remember that this disingenuous, fake woke identity politics bullshit, where the definition of progressivism is listening to geriatric dinosaurs who have more melanin in their skin than you, that particular brand of bullshit, that was invented by Hillary Clinton. It was weaponized by her against Bernie Sanders in the 2016 presidential campaign. She didn't invent progressivism and she didn't invent IDPOL, but she integrated it seamlessly into the language of the moderates in the Democratic Party. And since then, there has been a tidal wave of disingenuous bullshit that people have had to face anytime they challenge the establishment within the Democratic Party. The most recent example of which being the DNC having a re-election of their vice chair because a woman was supposed to win, or there was some procedural problem that didn't favor the voting process towards women of color because they want to unseat David Hogg. Would they do it if they liked David Hogg? No, but they don't like David Hogg, so they'll weaponize that bullshit against him.
Well, of course, everyone is very concerned. Fortunately, it's treatable, but for him to have this kind of a setback, it's just, it's terribly sad, and for the family to be going through this. I would just say that I have talked to people who were in the White House and close to the former president. And it is something that is very easily diagnosed at the early stage. You know, clearly that this is something that can be diagnosed with an early biopsy, with a TSA, with, elevated, rather, PSA levels. So I know something about this kind of disease, and I just know, we know.
Incredibly tight-knit family. Can you take us into what you imagine or what you might have heard they may be doing this weekend, how they're offering the president's support, the conversations that might be happening in his inner circle?
Well, first of all, this is a very tough time. This is a subject we were talking about the president, the former president, just this morning on Meet the Press because of all of the reporting. And
how do you personally feel about this? About Joe Biden getting cancer? What do you mean? I'm sure there are plenty of excellent hospitals he can visit in the Gaza Strip who will take care of him.
All right, we are back with our breaking news. That's NBC News, but it is unclear where the former president will receive his treatment. NBC's Yamiche Alcindor has been covering this story for us throughout the course of this evening. Yamiche, what have you learned?
Well, as this sad news has made its way around the world, we're hearing a slight tone change from some Republicans and hard-right conservatives, Donald Trump Jr., who is, of course, the president's son, as well as Ronnie Jackson, who was a former White House doctor and now serving in the U.S. Congress, the U.S. House, from Texas. They're both spreading conspiracy theories, unfounded claims about President Biden's cancer diagnosis. That said, the vast majority of people are really taking a somber tone, including President Trump. I want to read.
Yeah, one of Trump's aides tweeted out something because that shit was not written by him. It was just like, well wishes to Biden. Doesn't matter, whatever. Republican rep claiming the cancer diagnosis is part of the Biden cover-up. There we go. That's the authentic right-wing bullshit that I've come to know and love.
Referencing so brutal.
Your reaction?
Well, stage 4 cancer diagnosis, particularly the kind that they're referencing, is a brutal diagnosis. I mean, I feel terrible for anyone that would go through that, even somebody who I really don't like much as Joe Biden, but it's a terrible thing for him and his family. So I hope he beats it. But look, I don't believe that they just found out Friday, but because they're not credible on anything they've done. And you highlighted it's kind of concurrent with this release of the Hur tapes, which frankly Congress subpoenaed, and Merrick Garland as Attorney General was in contempt of Congress. He had no problem holding everybody else accountable for contempt of Congress, but he wouldn't even comply with the subpoena. So, you know, the whole thing was a big cover up, and I suspect that this cancer diagnosis is part of that whole scheme.
Release of the Hur tape? What is that? I think he's referring to like something that relates to some. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know and I don't care. Yeah, Don Jr. pinned this saying that he hid the diagnosis for a while. It doesn't really matter. I thought he was saying the cancer was a cover-up. Well, I think he's saying that the timed announcement of the cancer is a cover-up. It doesn't matter. No one likes Joe Biden, and history will not be kind to him. Saw libs calling him one of the greatest presidents ever on social media. You can see anything on social media. You chose to focus it and hold it in your mind. How many people did you see saying that? I will say that one of the more prominent Biden dead-enders in an environment where that position is getting more and more uncommon, like even members of the Democratic Party have been speaking out lately about how Joe Biden kind of us by staying in as long as he did, in addition to other things. Aaron Rupar is like gonna be the final boss of the Biden dead enders, man. Jesus Christ. Naomi Biden here. Just read a copy of this silly book, and if anyone is curious for a review from someone who lived it firsthand, the book is Political Fairy Smut for the Permanent Professional Chattering Class. This is the book that's like 100 testimonials from people around Biden talking about how he was obviously mentally compromised throughout his presidency. I just can't imagine being a Biden dead-ender now. How bad do things have to get? I don't know. I'm surprised Israel doesn't deify Biden after the shit he allowed them to get away with. Honestly, he was the best ally they could have asked for. Voters want Dems to stand up to Trump, not self-flagellate. I disagree. Oh, it's a Substack post. That's great. No, I actually think that Democrats really want, like, blood from the party, to be honest. Like, we're in this mess because of the Democrats. The Republicans have been basically the same for years now. The Democrats had every opportunity to tee themselves up, and they didn't.